And we're back, Stripe Show podcast on a Thursday, Instruction Thursday. I'm Travis Fulton. Hope you're having a good week. You notice in the backdrop today's podcast brought to you by About Golf Simulators. We've got the mini golf course set up today for the junior camp, the last junior camp that comes in here, in about 45 minutes. So we better get to it. And it's only fitting because today is about putting, in particularly greens reading. And a guy that knows a thing or two about putting is joining me here today. He teaches in the studio. I'm going to turn this real quick so you can see. Watch here. So we're panning out over to the other side. There it is. There's the putting green with his logo. That's Potter's Putting. You know him on Instagram, and he joins me from Greensboro, North Carolina. Marcus Potter, how you doing, bud?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Congrats, first and foremost, your boy, Lee Hodges.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was incredible to see that.
Yeah, finally gets his first win. I'm going to take a little credit because, we kind of get out in front with these players that are like trending and bubbling up. And it's like, Lee just feels like something's going on here. Like he's getting it. And I heard you talk about him. And so I was like, we better get Lee on. And we did. And he gets to the winner's circle, and it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
100%. A great human being.
So what was that like? Did you guys partied up a little bit? Have you seen him in person? What was that conversation like?
He FaceTimed me after he won when he was kind of having some drinks in the restaurant area, but I haven't seen him in person yet. I'll see him next week when I head to Memphis, but excited to see him. But it's been incredible. It's been really cool to see. Lee's worked really hard. I've worked with Lee on PGA Tour now for 2 years, and he's a really hard worker. A guy doesn't quit, and it was really awesome to see him get his first win.
Yeah, it was 7-shot lead. That seems to be the norm right now. These big, these big wins. Brian Harmon, Lee Hodges, the LPGA Tour event. I mean, people are running away with it. It's not easy to play with a lead, and he did a good job of it. Now, we're gonna start with Lee's putting stroke here. We're gonna talk a little technique here first, some things that you're working on, some things that I see with Lee Hodges, but then also I think the bulk today is about greens reading. And one thing that's helped Lee, and you introduced to him, was a concept or a system called Tour Read. I don't think a lot of people know as much about Tour Read and what's happening out there on tour with that, but they do know a lot about AimPoint, in particularly AimPoint Express. So I want to talk about the differences in those two, get your thoughts, and I think it'd be really interesting for the listeners today. Let's start with the man of the hour, Lee Hodges. There's his putting stroke. Is this at the Open Championship? What am I looking at here?
Yeah, this is from Royal Liverpool. This is the last time I saw him. I was over there with him. But this is, I think it's from Tuesday of Royal Liverpool.
Pretty, when I look at this, to me, if I had to kind of build a model, Marcus, around the setup, this is kind of where I would go with it. Like ball position a little forward, shaft maybe slightly forward, this conventional reverse overlap grip, elbow soft, shoulders pretty level, weight slightly left. Is that kind of what we're looking at here?
Well, you kind of nailed exactly everything. So he battles the ball getting a little too far back, kind of something that you mentioned. So we get that ball forward, and then something that I'll do in the studio, but that quintic is something that's really helped me learn about launch. And every time he gets that ball too far back, he kind of starts driving it into the green, and that affects speed. So that's, in this video, is kind of an ideal setup for him because it allows that launch to be perfect, and he can just kind of rotate around himself with where he's set up. So I really like that setup, and we've kind of been working hard on that for a little bit now.
So when the ball position gets back and you're driving it down, right? And so the attack angle would get a little steep, and you're driving the ball down into the ground. Is that what's happening?
Yeah. So the angle of attack everyone's different, but for Lee, when that starts to creep back from where it is there, he definitely starts to hit more down on it, and it kind of starts to go into the ground and then bounce off of it. And then speed control and even line becomes just unpredictable at that point.
So launch angle, the importance of launch angle. You mentioned quintic. Talk to my viewers. Give me 2 or 3 bullet points, if not more, about why launch angle and putting is important.
So that's the thing that the quintic's been the most helpful for me as a coach, is just seeing what launch can do. Because ideally, in a perfect world, we're going to launch it between 0.75 degrees and 2 degrees in the air. Because the reason we want to do that is, obviously, every time the ball's on the green, it's in a minor depression. even if it's just sitting there on top of the green, it's always kind of sitting down a little bit.
Mhm.
So the ball needs to get up. It needs to get a little airborne, kind of with some topspin to help that roll clean. And it's also going to avoid any bumps in the immediate area. That's why there's guys on tour, like Jason Day is a good example of someone who has a 2-degree putter, a 3-degree putter, and a 4-degree putter. And he switches based off of the green surfaces. Because typically slower greens, like the Open, you add more loft because you want to get it more up because the greens are more shaggy. And faster greens, you can get away with less loft, less launch because the greens are so much tighter that you don't really need to get it as airborne. But that's why loft is so important on people's putters. I mean, I see it all the time when people come in with 1 degree of loft and they're playing greens that are rolling 9. And you can't play golf that way. You can't putt from a fringe with 1 degree of loft. It just really takes everything out of it. And that's where stroke mechanics can get off if the loft doesn't match what people are doing with their stroke.
So this week you're there with Andrew Landry in Greensboro and Sedgefield. I mean, fast Bermuda green. So you're telling me fast Bermuda greens, there's players in the field that are going to take a little less loft this week?
Yeah. I mean, these greens are pretty grainy, but they're still, I mean, you can get away with, I think Andrew's probably got about 2.5 degrees of loft on his putter this week. And he kind of lives on the borderline of launch where he almost drives it a little too low at times. But when we get on fast greens, that's where it benefits him. And so he actually puts better on fast greens, a little bit predicted because of his launch. So these greens kind of fit him a little better, actually. But speed of greens is very important when it comes to launch.
Yeah, speed of green, when we talk about greens rating, is going to be an important component too. Let's go to this one. Here's the target line. Now, again, I look at this, and the eyes are just inside the line. The forearms are pointing down the putter shaft, this soft elbow, almost like palms rolled out kind of feel. So it just looks very clean to me. You know, this is like if I had to set someone up and say, hey, this is going to give you the best chance that when you create this little shoulder motion, that putter head's going to work on a very subtle natural arc, and the face is going to look down the intended line. This is where I would go.
100%. And this is so the most recent setup change we made from here was we got him a little closer to it, leaned a little more on top of it. Even in this video, it's not as on top of it as he has been, because something that I like to do with people is if you draw a line, or just even anyone could do this on your own setup, wherever your armpits fall, I typically like seeing them fall more in the middle of someone's foot. And a lot of the times with online students, they're really, not that in your heels is necessarily bad, but they're so far in their heels that their balance point is so off. And if you can get a little more pressure on the middle of your foot, you're going to notice just how much more stable you're going to be in your setup. And that's something that's actually really helped Lee, because it just allows you to kind of, again, stay in your posture, stay in your setup, and just kind of rotate around yourself a little bit. That's all it really is.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I tend to agree. I don't get putting videos long distance like you do. And you need to check out Marcus on Skillest app if you haven't, because look, you can take long distance lessons in full swing and it works, but putting it really works. So don't be afraid to jump on there and see the man here. But I tend to agree. What I see people in the studio here, I see them trying to get their eyes over the ball, and they get in real close, and then their weight kind of sits back.
Yep.
And so they don't have that adequate hip hinge and get over it. And so it's a really good point. And I think a really good takeaway for listeners and people watching this on YouTube is that you have to balance that out. You have to get far enough away that you can have some hip hinge and get over it. Yeah, your eyes over just inside, and there's a little wiggle room there, I would think. And so now your elbows are soft, and here you are. And then the putter should be there, right? And so like the length of that putter kind of factors in too, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so obviously if you have too long of a putter, you're going to get a little constricted. Your arms are going to be too in tight. Too short of a putter, you're going to have to bend over too much. Your arms are going to be too extended. Kind of in a perfect world, wherever your arms hang when you're in your setup is kind of the length of that putter. Lee's is about 34.5. He's about 6 foot, maybe 6'1". But there's no true set limit for putter length. I mean, Ricky Fowler, before he went to this obviously long putter, he's about 5'7", 5'8". He was using a 35-inch putter, which is on the longer end for someone that high, or someone that tall. But it's just interesting, and kind of going back to that balance point where For most people, when I see them online, if they could just lean a little more forward, not necessarily get closer to it, because usually where people are is fine. But like you said, they're so far in their heels, where if they can just lean a little more forward with their upper body, that's going to put their eyes more on top of it. That's going to get that hinge from the waist that you talked about, and it's going to get the balance point kind of in the middle of the foot more. And that's just going to be something that's, again, going to help stability, help them make a stroke that's more repeatable day in and day out. And it's just something as simple as leaning more forward.
What is the engine of Lee stroke? How is it? Is it shoulders, arms? I don't think it's hands, but what is the engine that he feels?
It's chest driven more than anything.
Chest, okay.
And so something that you've seen me use in the studio, that pendulum putting rod from Eyeline Golf, I'm a big fan of that. We've used that a lot for Lee. And the reason we use that is just to kind of create that feel of more of a chest driven stroke, because I love that device because it gets the hands, arms, and chest kind of all in sync. And it just allows you to make a kind of a chest driven stroke. Again, one big move. And then the arms and hands are just going to follow your chest. And that just makes the stroke way more repeatable. It naturally gets a little arc in there. It doesn't overdo the arc. And again, it's just something that anyone can kind of just set up and just feel a little rotation with the chest. And that really simplifies the stroke.
Yeah, I see you use that a lot. And it really does clean up a lot of things. And you can kind of see that here, a little chest driven, the shoulders stay pretty level. It's almost like just like a little bitty mini pivot,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, in many ways. All right, let's move on. Good stuff. It was great to see. I mean, how about a positive 6.4? Is that what it was? Putting?
Yeah.
That he had?
That was, and that's the funny thing. This is kind of as we're going into green reading. That's what's made a huge difference for him. Is just reading greens better, because he was kind of a chronic under reader. So his speed as a result was a little too firm. And now that he's kind of playing correct lines, the ball's coming in from the right side, so it's working towards the hole versus working away. And that's been a huge factor for his strokes gained putting, is just his speed's been way better because of better reads, in my opinion.
All right, so let's talk about the read, and let's talk about that education that has taken place here with Lee. Because probably as his coach, I mean, no one's watched him hit more putts than you have. And so in your mind, you're thinking, all right, he kind of tends to underread it, so he has to hit it harder. And that puts more stress on the one coming back. And so we gotta figure out how to get him to play more break, right? And so this is where now this system that's called Tour Read, that has been kind of a new thing for Lee. So take me into Tour Read and what that's all about.
So I got into Tour Read. There's nothing against AimPoint Express. It's worked great for some people. I just don't love how difficult AimPoint Express can be. There's a lot of variance, obviously. At 6 feet, you're on the ball. 7 feet, you're behind the ball. Arm length changes every day, kind of. You need to calibrate it. And if things get off, your reads are going to get off. Versus Tour Read's a math-based system. So you still need to know the slope. Kind of people, you'll see aim pointers kind of getting over their line, straddling it, figuring out the slope. And Lee's doing that same thing. But instead of throwing up a finger or anything, he's doing an equation in his head, and that's giving him the break in inches. And then from there, he just, if it's 12 inches or whatever, he's aiming 12 inches outright.
Okay, so the factors, so let's hang on to that, the equation, all right? Because we can't give away the equation, folks, because the equation is kind of the fruits of the labor for Tour Read, so we're not going to do that. But what we can do is talk about what's going into the equation, right? And so let me throw this at you, and you tell me what I'm missing. We have how long the putt is, right? Okay, so how far the putt is. Obviously, the longer the putt, the more time a putt has to break. Okay,
100%.
so that has to be the equation. We have the slope direction, right? We have to know, okay, well, which way is it going to break? Is this side higher or is this side higher? We have to know how severe that slope is, because the more severe the slope is, then the more it's going to break. And then the final I would think is the speed of the green, because the faster the putt, the more the faster the putt, the more time it has to break, right? The more it's going to break. So those are the equations as I see it. Through those four, am I missing any?
No, it's 100% right. Uphill, downhill is another factor as well.
Okay. So uphill, downhill.
Yeah. So like one thing I can give away, like uphill, downhill for every 1% is going to be, or for every 1% up or down is 5% of your read added or taken off, depending on if it's up or downhill. And so, like, if you have a 2% uphill putt, which you're not necessarily kind of gauging that, but you're just kind of visually looking at it, you're adding 10% on, or if it's uphill, you're taking 10% off your read. If it's downhill, you're adding 10% onto your read. And so there's a lot of little subtleties like that, but I love it because it spits out a number and it's an accurate number every time. I've been using this system for, I learned it from Ralph Bauer, who created it at Quail Hollow this year. And ever since he kind of walked me through that, gave me a lesson on it, I've been all in on it. And it's been freakishly accurate.
Wow.
Because one thing the people at home can do is there's a Tour Read Golf app, and you can download that. It actually uses your smartphone as a level, and then you can use this for practice. This is something Lee and I have used for practice a ton. And you go, so it gives the instructions on the app once you kind of download it and everything. But it pretty much, you put the phone on the ground, it reads the slope for you, and then you input how far you are. You put the speed of the greens, and it'll spit out an exact read for you. And that's honestly how a lot of guys that are using Tour Read are starting to practice, just because it's showing you accurate reads. And so instead of, oh, I think this is 6 inches out, it's okay, scientifically, this is 10 inches out. And that's why I haven't been putting as well, because I've been under reading things by half or whatever.
So so as he did the equation, and then and Tour Read saying, play this amount of break, he's looking at that going, wow, that's more break than I would play.
100%. Like, I've got a video from the PGA. The PGA is really where we started kind of practicing with it more than anything. And I've got a video of him hitting like a 24-footer downhill or something, and it was like 50 something inches of break. It's like a crazy little huge slider, and it goes right in the heart on the first putt. And you can kind of see him in the video I posted on Instagram. He just starts laughing after he made it, because he's like, no way, this thing's working like that.
So all right, so how smart do you have to be doing this equation in your head? Like,
it seems more complicated at first, but it's just basic math. It's just basic math.
okay.
It's not, anyone could do it.
I mean, the equation has to be similar to AimPoint, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah. And so AimPoint's different, obviously, because it's AimPoint Express, because it's so finger based and everything like that, and that's what gives you your read. This is just do this, do that, do this, and then your read is X. And so I've been a big fan of it just because it's just so much more consistent. You're going to get the same thing on a 9-footer, 1% slope every time. You're not going to misjudge it by putting your hand too far away or too close. It's more consistent. And one of the complaints that I've heard from aim pointers about Tour Read is, well, how do you know where 12 inches is? And there's no necessarily real argument to that. It's just that, I mean, people are relatively good at guessing how far something is, and the more you work on it, the better you get at it. And for Lee, from day one, that has never been an issue either. I think, to me, green reading is more about getting it in the general ballpark and, kind of like we said, having good speed. And so even if you aim, let's say the putt's 13 or 14 inches, and you aim 15 or 12, speed, depending on your speed, you're still going to make that putt.
Gosh, maybe I should do a Stripe Show podcast seminar with Ralph on Tour Read.
Yeah, I think you'd love to do it. Ralph's an awesome dude. He's been very helpful and very appreciative of all the help you've done.
How many guys are using Tour Read on tour right now? Roughly. I mean, you don't know exactly, but just, is it something that is like becoming more popular?
It's still kind of new, because a lot of people AimPoint's still kind of the dominant thing. Off the top of my head, I can only think of like 6 or 7 guys off the top of my head that are using it in practice.
Okay.
I don't know how many are using the on-course system. I know Lee is, obviously, but I don't know how many of Ralph's guys or how many other guys are doing it, because I haven't even asked Ralph about that.
Yeah.
But I'm all in on the tour or on-course system. I love the practice system as well. That app has been super beneficial for practice, but taking it on course with that system has been incredible.
So the equation, and we're not going to give away the equation, but obviously Lee in his mind is saying, okay, I'm this far away. I think the slope direction is this way, roughly this percent. And I know what the speed of the green is. And so that I do that equation in my head, and it's saying, play it this amount.
100%. And Like the one thing you'll notice if anyone sees Lee on, I'm guessing he'll be on some coverage next week, is if you'll see him putt, he walks off every putt now.
Yep.
Every
Saw
distance.
that.
You
I saw
have to
that.
know
Yep.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Look like Bryson.
not many people do that because
Right.
the original AimPoint, you had to know the distance and everything. But I mean, I kind of like it for a couple different reasons. It really gives you a good feel of the distance of the putt. And it kind of becomes a good routine where it's like, okay, on these longer putts, I've got a good visual now because I know I've walked it off. It's 50 feet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like I've done this for however long now. And I think that's also helped Lee's speed just because you're kind of naturally getting more in touch with the length of the putt. And I found that getting the read first almost makes speed easier, especially if the read's accurate. Because all right, all I need to do is hit it on a foot by speed on. I know this line's relatively accurate, and that to me has actually made kind of allowing people to capture that speed easier.
So the optics of what we see on tour now, like some people kind of really push back when someone's straddling the line and they're trying to sense through their feet. Do you think where we are with AimPoint and Tour Read and what you see out there has it slowed play down? Really no difference at all, or has sped it up?
That would be a great question. I honestly couldn't tell you.
Okay.
It ultimately kind of comes back to the same, like people need to be doing their stuff when other people are playing without obviously affecting people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing about AimPoint Express, Tour Read, to straddle the line. I mean, I've seen it with Lee a bunch of times on course where he's playing with two other people and he can't straddle his line where he wants to do it, where he needs to do it because he's going to be stepping on other people's lines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of one thing that I think golf in general needs to get a little better at again is etiquette. Because you kind of start to see some of those videos of college golf where people are just walking right next to the hole, stepping on other people's line. And etiquette's kind of needs to be taught, I think, with AimPoint Express, taught with Tour Read.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of an issue. But AimPoint Express is for sure the most dominant green reading system out there. I don't know of too many others. Tour Read, obviously, but everything is kind of trending that way.
Yeah.
Especially with kind of everyone wanting to be more precise, us having the measurements of everything, having these equations that we know are accurate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, why would we kind of relatively guess with our eyes when we can have a more educated guess with a system?
Yep. I think that's a good point. And, look, I think AimPoint, when it came about, Mark Sweeney and that whole group, I just thought it was fantastic. It still is. I mean, I think it's a great system. And now it's interesting, Tour Read kind of coming off of that a little bit. It's a little bit different maybe with the way it's using the equation, because you can't have an equation in your book. There's things that you can't have in your, that the player has in their book there. Right. So he has to do the equation in his head, which is interesting. But I think greens reading's really come a long ways. And
100%.
And Mark Sweeney's had obviously probably the biggest impact on that in bringing these factors to life. And now here's Tour Read. And so, where do we go from here? It's just a fascinating piece of the puzzle, because before that, everybody's using just their eyes, and your eyes can't see everything. And so you have to maybe go into other factors that help you sense what's happening with your green. For me, just using my eyes, I struggle when the putt looks straight, or maybe it isn't. So my eyes, I struggle with that. And I know a lot of listeners, I know they struggle with that too. You're looking at it like going, man, I might go that way. She might go that way.
That's funny you said that, because Royal Liverpool, flattest greens I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen a flatter putting greens on golf courses in my life than Royal Liverpool. It was amazing in the practice rounds. I'd have a 20-footer, 40-footer, and you'd be like, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if this goes left. And this could be dead straight. And even Lee, he'd straddle the line, he'd get his read, and he'd be like, dude, like this is half a degree, maybe.
Yeah.
And it's just at that point, so it's like guys were missing putts there because it was kind of like you were saying, it's so straight, you don't know which way to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where a good putter who saw those greens well, like I'm guessing Brian Harmon did, and he was obviously a great putter. You can have a great putting day. You can have a great putting week like that, because if you get hot on those greens, I feel like you could make everything, because they're only rolling 10. And then again, they're just so flat.
It's interesting. That's really interesting. And Harmon, who's obviously a terrific putter historically, went there and clearly read those greens, extremely well, better than everyone else. I mean, the dude made everything. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like
And
watching that guy putt.
I've always considered myself a pretty good green reader just through my eyes, and I've been kind of working on Tour Read myself, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not. I was really struggling to read those greens. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think Lee in our 3 practice rounds had like 10 double breakers from like 15 feet, and I'm just like, it's because the greens are so flat, the slopes are just subtly curving. And I was like, I've never seen a golf course like this where the greens are so unique, so flat.
Yeah. So also it's tough looking. It's tough to see breakdown hill, right? It's like the aerial effect. You're looking down on a golf course, it looks flat. And the reality is Augusta's like going like this, up and down, and you can't really see that until you get down below it and look back up. Right. So what are some of the other things that you've kind of noticed in that where your eyes can kind of fool you? Is that another one where it's that downhill and you don't see it as well?
So something I like people to do, and I learned this, I think I read it from Stockton, was he's like, I like people to read greens kind of like a book. You would never read a book from above it. So you always kind of go to the low side. If the putt's right to left, you're going to kind of go below it. And so you can kind of see the severity of the slope. Kind of like you said, you don't want to look down on a slope. It's hard to see it. So you always kind of want to be looking up the slope, look from behind the hole, behind the ball, and then kind of like you're reading a book below it. And that to me has been a huge help for people. I'll kind of walk people through it. I'm doing lessons with them on that. And that kind of just gives you a different visual, because sometimes I'll see people go to that high side, kind of like you're reading a book from the opposite side. And it's like you can't really see much from there because it's a little deceptive. Versus if you go to that low side, you're going to kind of see where the ball wants to funnel. You're going to see the general slope of the green better. I think that's kind of a good little tip for people, actually.
Yeah, little subtleties, right? And you start thinking about a 12, 15-foot putt and it looks straight. Man, I'm not sure. Might break. You're kind of like, we all been there. Like, man, I'm not sure what the hell this is going to do. And you're like, oh God, it's my turn to hit. You get up there and so these are the subtleties of using systems like this that I think that can really help. Look straight, downhill, an equation that's going to help me make a more educated decision, not guess, but decision on where to put it. And then based on that decision, and this is what I love the most about AimPoint, is that I make a decision based off of these factors. And it's like, okay, I hit it there and I hit it the right speed, but I got it wrong. And so why did I get it wrong? And usually I got it wrong. I mean, it better not be slope direction that you got wrong because you had no chance. But it's usually the severity of the slope, right? I mean, that's where you start to really calibrate and educate yourself on the nuance of the severity of the slope.
Yeah, and kind of like some question you asked earlier, kind of about stuff that's happening on tour. And if you go to a practice green on any tour event, you'll see even guys that aren't necessarily doing AimPoint or Tour Read, they'll have levels out. They're gauging slope. Most everyone's got a digital level out there. You can't take them on the golf course anymore, right. But practice green is where you'll see it every week. They're written 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, so that people can go over and kind of straddle it and get the feel for that. And that's something that Lee and I work on all the time. That's something that every aim pointer works on. Because like you said, that's the biggest factor for AimPoint Express for Tour Read is the slope percentage. And if you can get really good at that, that's going to be huge.
Would you say that for those players, that caliber of player, if they get that right, they make more putts? I mean, period.
Yeah.
Because they're hitting it where they're looking.
Like you said, speed's still a factor. You still got to hit the putt on line.
Yeah, right.
But if you don't have a good read, you're not going to make putts in general.
Right.
So.
But that caliber of player, I mean, look, they're going to start the ball pretty close. I mean, I know they go through moments where it's, not very good. But, I mean, like, I give Lee Hodges, Brian Harmon, and I'm telling them, like, look, man, this is what exactly the slope percentage is. And, okay. Like, I mean, like, they get that right, man, the percentage of making the putt goes way up.
100%. And that's kind of where going back to a system kind of is so important, because it gives you the consistency in what you're doing. And kind of like you said earlier too, like the thing that I like, whatever system you use, whether it be AimPoint, Tour Read, anything, it gives you a system to go back and be like, okay, did I hit a good putt first off? Yes or no? And if it's no, you kind of throw everything out because it's totally irrelevant. The data is flawed at that point. But if you hit a good putt, okay, did I make it or miss it? If you missed it, all right, was it missed high or low? If it missed high or low, obviously slope percentage was wrong. And then based off your speed, how far by the hole did it go? Was it short of the hole? And it kind of gives you like a checklist you can walk through. Like, okay, everything was good. I just got the slope wrong. That's easy. Hit a good putt. And I think
stuff.
It's kind of like a mental checklist more than anything. Because obviously when guys miss, let's say they miss the first 12 putts of the day, hitting it great, miss first 12 putts, they're even par through 12 holes, putting terrible.
Yeah.
If you kind of don't have a checklist, if you don't have a system, you don't have a routine, you're going to kind of start, wow, am I reading these greens wrong? What am I doing? Like, am I stroking it bad? And that kind of can lead people to get a little off mentally and then kind of start chasing stuff they don't need to chase, either stroke or physically.
And then, and here's the thing, and I tell people this all the time, you're going to get it wrong. Like you're going to go through this, you're going to get it wrong, but then that's where the value comes in because you made a more educated decision. And then what'd you miss? Okay. So it was a little more severe than I thought. I got to get a little better. Okay. So that goes in the memory bank. And so guys, I would imagine out there on tour, I would imagine that you would say, hey, go stand right there and tell me what that percent is. And Lee does it. And it's like, okay, it's 1.5. You put the level down, 1.3. Good. And okay, now go do it over there.
That's exactly what we're doing. Like practice screen, when we're like, we'll set up like a 15-footer. Yeah. He'll go down. I'll be like, what do you think it is? And I'll put it right between his feet. And I'll be like, good, or half a degree off or whatever. And that's just how people can learn. It's just trial and error, honestly.
It's awesome. It's really, it's good stuff, man. And like I said, it's cool to see how far this part of the game has come. AimPoint, Mark Sweeney. Now it's Bauer, right?
Yeah, Ralph Bauer.
Yeah, Ralph Bauer with Tour Read. So we're in a great spot. I knew this would be interesting, and I think our listeners, I think, have really enjoyed this one. Just looking at the stroke of Lee Hodges, but also what's going on in reading a green and just how that's now continuing to evolve off of AimPoint with Tour Read. Marcus, good stuff. When are we going to see you here, man? We miss you. I know you're going to be out there. Lee's in 32nd right now?
33rd. He's not playing
33rd.
this week. But so I'm going to go as far as he makes it in the playoffs. And then I'm not sure on my schedule yet. I'm for sure going to be back in December, but I'm going to try and get back at least one time before then as well. Things got a little crazy this year. Lee qualifying for the Open changed the schedule. Lee winning that tournament changed the schedule. Yeah. So it's been a good year though.
Well, you're out there winning PGA Tour events. I mean, I think we kind of understand that. But we'll get you back here in the studio where he does lessons, and he does online lessons on skills as well. So check him out at Marcus or at Potter's Putting. Marcus, we appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Travis. Good talking to you again.